It's Too Many Men on the Mic, presented by Netfront LLC. Now here's Coach Drew and Coach Jared.
Man, that song's growing on me. I mean, it's April. This is our first show of April 2026, and we have a great one. We're at the end of hockey season. We're at the beginning of spring hockey. It's a perfect time to talk about coaching, player development, being a good parent, all the things that go into hockey. And we got a good guest today.
Yeah, we're joined by Matt Dumouchelle. A little bit of a different take than what we normally do. Obviously, we're talking a lot to coaches and players and sometimes parents. Matt actually fits a lot of those roles, but he has a unique spot in hockey and hockey in general. He's a writer for Coaches site, which is a great resource for coaches out there. We're both members of it. We're kind of dipping our toes and trying to learn from other coaches through that site. He also works hand in hand with many organizations, not just in North America, because he is based out of Canada.
He's a Canuck.
Yes, but also overseas. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to learn some things, get some insight from Matt, some of the relationships he has. So let's go ahead and bring him on. And, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Dumouchelle.
Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
What's up, Matt?
Great to be here. Love the Red Wings flag behind you guys. All good over here.
You can say something nice about the Blues at any point during this broadcast.
I used to work in Owen Sound, Ontario. I worked there at the radio station there for almost 3.5 years, and Jordan Binnington was the goaltender at the time that we were up there, or I guess it would have been a little bit afterwards. I did some radio play-by-play and stuff with them. So got to know Binner a little bit as a junior and always enjoyed watching the fiery side of Jordan as a junior goalie. It hasn't left him anytime soon.
Well, he's certainly authentic.
Yeah, Binner definitely in this town has ingratiated himself, and most of Canada, especially with the Four Nations. Although I think most of Canada would like a repeat or redo on February 26th.
That was a great day for hockey in general, and I think that's going to be one of those days that we talk about and remember for a long time, good or bad. I was in Florida at the time visiting my parents with my kids, and my little guy and I had a great plan. We were going to go down by the pool and sing the Canadian national anthem after we won in front of all the Floridians, and we ended up staying inside that day. It was a little too bad.
Well, Matt, I'm confident that there's no shortage of topics that we're going to be able to talk about. The challenge would be how we can compress this into an hour time frame.
Right.
But why don't we start let's talk about the Coaches site. Let's talk about why you started it, why it's been something that has been a passion of ours. So some of our listeners might not know about it. Some of our coaches might not know about it. So why don't you put the pitch out there and tell our audience a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I mean, the coachessite.com, if you haven't had a chance to go to it as a coach, truly is the premier website for coaches in hockey, but in all kinds of different sports as well. There's a lot of X and O drills on the site, but there's also a lot of leadership stuff. There's a lot of interaction between coaches in group chats or posts that get shared. It's really become a one-stop shop for for anything to do with hockey, and they're excited about expanding that and working with different sports and different coaches and all of that in the future. My piece of the puzzle was essentially they have a podcast there as well. Not to plug a podcast on a podcast, but they're called the Glass and Out podcast, and Aaron Wilbur, who's the founder of the Coaches site, hosts that, and he gets some outstanding guests from all levels of hockey and experience and coaches and such on the show. So I have a background in media. I've worked in radio for about 10 years, loved the show. And so I had sent him an email just kind of out of the blue and asked, like, has anybody ever interviewed you on the show? Not just as I'm Aaron Wilbur, I'm the founder of the Coaches site, look what I've done, but you have had one-on-one conversations with more high-level coaches maybe than anybody through the years that you've done the Glass and Out podcast, like just through osmosis and pure conversation. You've probably learned so much that you could share just upon reflection. So we were fortunate enough to have that conversation. I still laugh about it to the day. I was recording the show, and I'm right outside my kitchen window at the time at an older place that I lived at. And the sky is black. Like, I mean, it is about to rain dogs and cats and hail and everything else you can think of. And halfway through the show, all I'm thinking to myself is, if the power goes out here, this guy's going to think, like, who the heck is this guy? Never going to call this guy again. But everything stayed online at least. And then afterwards, he had asked if I had ever done some writing, and fortunately it had. And he had said that we're looking at doing this idea called Hockey Factories, where we do in-depth looks at some of the biggest programs in the world from a development perspective. Would that be something you're interested in? Obviously, an incredible opportunity, and it truly has been one of the great blessings that I've had in my time working and being involved in sports, getting to do Hockey Factories. So we've done 15 of them so far, and that is, I hop on Zoom calls and I'm talking to a U13 coach or a head coach of a first team or anybody in between, parent, equipment manager, minister. We talked when we did Shattuck St. Mary's. So we've done 15 of them now in Sweden, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Canada, the US, Switzerland, all over the world. And the idea behind it was, twofold. And, what is it that Frölunda in Sweden does that makes Frölunda, right? Like, how are they that big in that community? How are they that huge and successful in that country, in the continent, in the world? And then what is something that they're doing, or what are things that they have built into their philosophy that I can do in Windsor, Ontario, where I am, or you can do in St. Louis, or, the biggest centers to the smallest centers, trying to find little wins. It's the art of stealing is the art of coaching, right? So we're just trying to find different things that we can bring ideas, strategies that these clubs do that perhaps you could do at home. And I've been fortunate enough to have some awesome conversations with some incredible people I would have never met otherwise. And, getting to work with different organizations now and coaches and players and in a development setting or an organization setting is me taking what I've learned and trying to help create the best youth sports experience for every child that's involved in sport, whatever sport that may be.
I love it. You just coined an ism. The art of stealing is the art of coaching.
Yeah.
So we're going to add that to our ism list of Michelle.
Great.
So as we look at the Coaches site, and kind of many of these, whether it's Coach Them or whether it's Huddle or some of these other sites, app, they tend to always gravitate, even USA Hockey to some degree, gravitates towards the higher level kids, the elite level kids, or the emerging elite players. What makes your interactions different, or how are you trying to create an even playing field as you're talking to these different organizations and making it relatable to folks who are house wrecked, or maybe they're not quite certain of their path in hockey, and there's an opportunity to create a great experience? Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's something that I hold near and dear to my heart too. When I say, I want to help create an environment that supports every child that's involved, that means every child that's involved. That doesn't mean, we as organizations in general always will put a little extra effort into the elite programs or the A programs or select or whatever you end up calling it. But the 10,000 foot view that I'll talk about and try to bring in the different ideas when I'm presenting with groups and organizations and such is the 5%, right? Like if you've got one select team, I use my son as an example. He's an 8-year-old. He'll be 9 in May, and he's a hockey player, and he played house league this year. There's 4 teams of 15 kids in his league, but they're not getting anywhere near the same training, the same development structure, the same feel as the elite team that has 15 kids. So it's not to say we need to take anything away from the elite kids. The elite thing is a different topic entirely. But what I talk with organizations about it is really creating a feeder system within yourself as an organization, where if you are giving the coaches that are house league coaches structure, if you're giving them guardrails of what your expectations are this year, this year we are at U9, our big focus is skating. We want at the end of the year, every kid's strong skater forwards, every kid's feeling pretty good about themselves backwards. And every kid that's on your team this year needs to sign up next year because they had a great time this year. If we've given that U9 coach that guardrail, he can use his creativity to teach them skating. And, we don't have coaches that just come out of the stands that have never experienced hockey or anything like that for the most part. So how are we helping them? Because end of the day, if we're focused on that coach, we're going to help develop more players, which end of the day, just through numbers in general, if you start with 15 kids at U9 select, it's not going to be the same 15 kids at U18. So are you pulling from your organization? Are you bringing in other people that are taking spots for kids that are within your house league program? How does this all look under the umbrella of the organization as opposed to U10 select or U13 AAA or whatever that looks like?
And I think those are the triangles you talk about, Matt, right? Where we're referencing the club and the support the association has for its coaches, which then helps translate over into parent expectations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about things in triangles in presentations when I work with teams. I look at there's 2 different triangles that are attached together. There's the big triangle at the top is the organization, the coaches, and the parents. Like they all have to be working together and be on the same page and be clear with expectations on all 3 sides. If one of those sides falls, the whole triangle falls. Underneath that is the coach, player, parent conversation or triangle. If those 3 aren't on the same page, if those don't understand expectations from each side, and this is being a give and take kind of relationship that you're building, that triangle falls. The one from the top is going to fall. The whole thing collapses. And we joke about it, but I mean, you could have a Connor McDavid, you could have an Austin Matthews, you could have a John Tortorella or a Scotty Bowman coaching. It's not going to matter if the organization, the coaches, and the parents aren't on the same page, and then the coach, the player, and the parent aren't on the same page. Because one thing that we do generally, and I say that generally speaking, within an organization, we tend to select a coach and we're giving them the keys to the Lamborghini and telling them good luck. Where are we as an organization are responsible for that coach and putting him in the situation that we're in. Where in a perfect world, in a perfect organization, I think, or not to say that that exists, but what that looks like is the organization is given that coach guardrails, goals. This is what we're expecting of you to deliver this year. At the end of the year, when we evaluate you, this is what we're going to be evaluating you on. The parent then gets involved in that conversation with the coaches at the beginning of the year meeting or whatever that looks like. This year, our mandate is ABC. We win 10-1, we lose 10-1. We're going to talk about how we played with possession of the puck, because that's the emphasis that we're having this year. Now everybody understands what that looks like. We're not talking in generalities or cliches like hockey IQ or, everybody's going to play if they put in their best effort, because parents by default are going to translate that to the benefit of their own child. And that's nothing wrong on parents. That's being a good parent. Okay, all this coach is looking for is for my kid to work hard and have a great hockey IQ. Well, he'll be on the first line in the power play by Christmas, and now but he's not now. And he is working hard, and and this is what coach said he had to do. And now we've created tension within the organization that didn't even have to be there, because we created it ourselves, right? It's man-made. We didn't communicate that across the board, get a clear understanding with everybody of what that looks like. And now we've created an internal problem that doesn't have to be there.
All right, I'm gonna hop on into it because you put it out there. It's like feed the ball on. So, parents, you can create tension within a hockey organization. Just putting that out there.
No way.
I say we wrap it up right now, guys. It's not going to get any deeper than that.
Yeah, if you can solve that problem. Well, let's talk a little bit about your journey to this point. I think you've got a very unique way that you come into this sport that gives you some very unique perspective, not just as a parent, but as a person who works very closely with some high-achieving organizations. And then from that point, let's kind of work back to that. We call it, everything here is in threes. Hockey games in 3 periods. You want to score a hat trick, get 3 goals.
Yes,
and there's 3 zones. And you've got parents, coaches, and players. And sometimes,
there's 4 lines once you get older, not 3. but there's some Canadian teams that play with 2.
There's three kids. There's 3 kids on a forward line. But talk a little bit about your journey here as we wrap up this first segment.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, my background is radio, and I had gotten into radio because of sports. I grew up, in Windsor, Ontario. We can see Detroit from where we are. I grew up listening to Ernie Harwell called Tiger games.
You're not doing so well.
Well done, Matt.
You're not doing so well.
We don't hear that horn very much in March. That's the problem.
Yeah. March. See the Red Wings.
Yeah, but that was it. I always grew up listening to Ernie Harwell call Detroit Tiger games. When I was a kid, to me, that's still the voice of baseball is Ernie Harwell. It'll never change. And that was what had kind of gotten me interested in that. So I worked in radio always with the intention of working in sports. I was very fortunate for what the radio industry is to work 10 years, co-hosted a morning show for almost 5 years until they told me that I didn't anymore. And at that point, I had said, well, I've always wanted to cover sports. I'll always want to be involved in sports. I started working on the team sides. There was a basketball team that launched in Windsor where it was. Started working with them. We won 2 championships to start that. I worked with a pro baseball team and lived Bull Durham for a summer, riding buses from one place that we'd never heard of to another place we'd never heard of. And it was one of the best summers of my life. And then I started working in hockey. I worked with a junior C team and a junior B team, and then I got on with the Leamington Flyers, who are now in the OJHL, and was with them for 6 years. We won a Sutherland Cup together, first time in franchise history, which was an incredible experience. Well, thank you. We're still celebrating that one. And now I get to do this with watching my kids enjoy sports. I've got a stepdaughter that loves basketball and soccer. My daughter is more into the theater and the arts and all that. So you see like the alignment and the cohesion amongst a theater group is no different than what we talk about with the hockey team. But she plays soccer and baseball. She's on the school basketball team. She made her first basket today. My little guy plays hockey, and so I get to enjoy that through them as well. And I sit on the board in Riverside with our minor hockey program here, and I get to do the writing from the coaches site. So I'll always be immersed in it somehow, and I feel like I've learned a lot about what makes good organizations good and bad organizations bad. And it's never, it comes down to not being about pointing fingers. It's not to say you're doing a bad job or this organization is doing a bad job. That's why I'm here. There's always ways to do something better. And the best coaches and the best programs and the best scientists and the best of the best at whatever they do never want to stop learning and never want to learn from how other people do it and see what's going on in the industry and that's what I'm hoping to provide with the clubs that I work with.
Last minute of play in this period.
Well, that's a great place to take a break, I think, and come back for a quick break as we unpack a lot of the things that you're doing on the coaches site, some of the great conversations you're having with coaches all around the world, and how we get this out to the masses and help many of those coaches, moms, dads, older brothers and sisters, and grandparents who are out volunteering for the love of the game, help them get better. So if you've got some time, Matt, we're going to take a quick break, a few bills, and we'll be right back.
Let's do it.
Just because the winter weather is coming to an end doesn't mean the hockey stops. So sign up for your team with Big Bear Tournaments for one or more of their spring 2026 events. Starting April 24th through May 15th, join them at any of the prime spring locations, which include Chicago, Ann Arbor, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Lake Tahoe. Exact dates and full details can be found at bigbeartournaments.com. As always, tell them Too Many Men on the Mic sent you to receive exclusive savings. That's bigbeartournaments.com, and tell them Too Many Men on the Mic sent you.
Real quick before we jump back in, if you're enjoying Too Many Men on the Mic, hit like and subscribe. And subscribe on our YouTube channel. It's a quick click for you, but it helps us grow the show and keep bringing you great hockey conversations. You can also follow us on Instagram by scanning the QR code in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. And be sure to download, follow, and rate the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Or go directly to our website, tooManyMenOnTheMic.com. That's the number 2. Those small things from you help us keep delivering new guests, downloadable coaching content, and more from the rink. All right, back to the show. We're back with Matt Dumouchelle from the coaching site, or the coaches site. And we ended the break talking a little bit about your history, what your passions were, how you got into, working and writing on the coaches site, and really helping to what really feels to me like an aggregation of best practices with hockey and youth hockey specifically around the world. Talk a little bit about the deliverables and what you're hoping to deliver to organizations, whether it's a junior team like Leamington that you worked for, or whether it's a youth hockey organization like maybe the St. Louis Rockets here in St. Louis. Talk a little bit about that and what those deliverables are, and we'll see where the convo goes from there.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've kind of touched on a couple of key things in that for sure. When we look at Hockey Factories, the articles that I've done for the coaches site, again, I said we've done 15 so far, and they each kind of take on a life of their own or a different type of story or angle. But there's a lot of key things in there that are repeated over and over again. And, communication is obviously part of that. And I think to me, organizations in general are not run by bad people. The people that are in it don't want to do harm or ruin the reputation of the organization. I think what happens if it's not taking the time to look internally and look at your systems and look at the way that your philosophy is built out, and having that second set of eyes is a line that's used quite a bit in that kind of sense. To come in and say, hey, when there's a question about this, how is it handled? Or when you have a situation like this, who is that parent or who is that coach going to talk to? Finding a lot of, I don't think there's big mistakes that a lot of organizations are doing. I think it's just little things that as they ignore or focus on something else, different parts of the organization drift. So I think what the most important part of that is there are ways to do this, to bring groups back together, to bring coaches, make sure the organization is aligned. Take that mantra that everybody has on their website that talks about wanting to develop great people and serving the community and all those things. What are ways that we're living that? Or maybe we're not living that right now. Maybe there's something else that we as a group do really, really well that's valuable, that we can highlight. Maybe we are always out in the community. Okay, why aren't we using our social media more to show us out in the community and show what you're able to be a part of if you were to join a certain organization? The alignment to me has always been the biggest thing within any group that I've talked to or that I've seen and interacted with, good and bad. If you're not all aligned, if you're not clear on your goals and ambitions over a course of a year, that's when the filters come in. That's when the noise comes in. And end of the day, we end up always transferring or defaulting back to winning. So now that we don't have a benchmark for our year because our organization is kind of just given me this team, and I don't know what the U13s are doing, and I don't know what the U11s are doing, but me at U12, I've got this team, and it's very easy for coaches to put themselves in a silo and be more concerned about the practice the next day or the tournament next weekend instead of, if this child stays with our organization for their entire time that they can play youth hockey, I'm 10% of that kid's coach's connection or interaction within this organization. So maybe I'm not the best at stick handling, but I can teach you how to use your edges and I can teach you how to do this. Now we're adding pieces to the puzzle, right? Because we have a lot more time than we make it seem like we do to kids or try to convince to parents or whatever that is. So to me, that getting everybody on the same page in the same room, asking the same questions over and over again and dissecting that is not something that I think most organizations know how to do, number one, or are able to find somebody that can facilitate that. And at the end of it, when you say, okay, this is what we are, now we've got a direction to go in together.
Yeah, and all of that that's great. I love, as you were talking, I was thinking about where I wanted to go next, and where I wanted to go next is, you mentioned it, the associations maybe don't have a playbook. They don't know where to start. So is part of what you do when you work with organizations coming in and helping them kind of get a plan together, so that an organization can have a plan and then can align coaches to the plan? It kind of seems to me like one has to come before the other, and maybe the association is the starting point, the first triangle, right?
Exactly. And I think, it's funny when we break things down into those different types of levels like you're talking about. Each of them are so crucial to the other. I will be the first person to tell you that the coaches within an organization are what that organization is. No matter what, obviously there's no coaches, there's no game, but who those coaches are, how they carry themselves, what they represent, what they're teaching, like that's the whole thing. But in saying that, the organization above it, if it's not full of people that are pushing in the right direction, that have the right objectives, that have a mission in mind, that are, worried about long-term development, but also, yes, it's great that we were able to teach this kid how to shoot a backhand or dribble a basketball or throw a fastball. But at the end of the day, that kid is going to be somebody we're putting back into our community, that may be going to school here, that one day may open a business here, that may work for somebody at some point in their lives. One of the things that I presented, I kind of going off track with this too, but in the same sense, the 0.01% of the professional athletes in the world that are playing right now are probably not the best in their age group realistically. That's the second part of that is, of that group, when we talk about a youth sports organization or the players in general, 45 to 47% of them at some point in their lives are going to be parents. 92% of those people at some point in their lives are going to carry a full-time job. So they're either going to work for somebody, work with somebody, or, own a business and have many people working for them. So again, when I talk about having those organizations being able to examine that and break that down into what they are, you can build that out, and then your coaches can live that every day. And your parents and players, who are the ones that are investing the time and money and all of that, are reaping the benefits from a system that everybody understands and has been put together from the top to the bottom.
Drew and I come from a unique perspective in that players, coaches, parents, we were also administrators for a youth hockey organization. We were both served on a board, and for the better part of almost a decade, 8 and 9 years, we ended as Drew left as president, I left as treasurer. What we have seen is the path is littered with good intentions, and it's understanding how to create a culture where parents can help to guide and bring their expertise to bear. But when we talk about accountability, how does an organization, what are the tools, what are the tactics we can employ to hold a volunteer coach accountable who's rushing to make a 5:30 practice after work so he or she can be on the ice with their kid and 12 other strangers' kids? And how do organizations lean in to support while also maintaining expectations? Like you said something earlier about, doesn't matter if we win or lose this year, but we want to make sure that we're playing a support game all season long. And if we can develop that, that's the win. How do organizations convince parents from all different walks of life who have all different mindsets and all different definitions of what success is like, and then push this organization forward? What tools and tactics can you use? Because what we found is that you could have great intention and great environments early in the season, but then post Thanksgiving or post the holidays and Christmas and what have you,
the wheels fall off.
Yeah,
it tends to happen.
What are successful organizations doing that you can share with our listeners? Because we talk to and work with a lot of organizations ourselves.
Mm-hmm. One of the key things to that, and when we talk about communication, again, it's a buzzword. It could mean anything. What does it actually look like? But you're communicating throughout the year with your coaches as an organization to get a feel of what temperature you feel in the room, what the parent group is like, who's coming to you with what, and at least having a sense of what that is. A few organizations they work with, specifically in Europe, were big on surveys. And I know we have a thing here about surveys or something about it, in the idea that I'd love to say that I don't think this coach runs a great practice, but when I hit send, there goes my son or daughter's ice time immediately, right? The fear that you're going to say too much or whatever it is that is going to lend your less ice time to your kid, or the coach is going to hate your kid, or whatever it would be. But what they're able to do is use it as again a thermometer to see how the parents, how the players, how the coaches are feeling throughout the year. So you send these out 4 times a year. You send them out at the beginning of the year. How's everybody feeling coming into it? You send one out at Christmas. You send one out just before the playoffs, and then you send one out at the end of the year. it's almost the same questions. It's the same general idea. But the most important part of that, and this was something that was spoken to me from one of the programs that we did, Derail in Sweden, was, it's just as important what you do with the answers that you get than getting answers. We send out a survey to 15 people, maybe 7 of them, 8 of them, if you're lucky, send something back. 4 of them say it's the best coaching experience they've ever had. 4 say it's the worst coaching experience they've ever had. What are you doing with that information? If it doesn't mean anything to you, then you're asking the wrong questions.
Right.
How about being more intentional with your answer? A guy who's a big mentor to me and somebody that I've leaned on through this process is a guy named Rick Bracey, who's with the Edmonton Oilers and amateur scouting director. He had always told me that we have to deal in absolutes. Do you think your child is developing as a hockey player this year? Yes, no, why? Why do you say that? Because if you tell me it's because the coach runs a bad practice, that'll pique my interest. I'll see what else I see in some of the other answers. If the answer to the next question is also the coach, if the answer that, okay, now we're creating something, maybe we can consider this for what it is.
And those questions are prescribed, tell me if I'm off here, based on the organization's objectives and their plan, right? So you're asking questions that align to your plan to confirm from your audience that you're supporting your plan.
Right. At the beginning of the year when we had a parent meeting, this is what we told you we were.
Right.
We're just making sure that we are what we are, but we're also what we told you that we are, right? How is this shaping out for everybody? And finding that out different times throughout the year, because like you said, everybody's going to have a pretty positive outlook at the beginning of the year. Christmas will be decent enough. Playoffs, it's going to be, hardcore, and end of the year, Lord knows what you're going to get back. So again, what are you doing with the answers?
I like the absolute, and I like
right?
but I like the follow-up even more, and why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where I struggle a little bit, and let's get a little controversial. Let's talk. Here's where I struggle a little bit. As an organization, and then as a group of an age group, as you look at each age group, and shouldn't there be standards that we first adhere to? So let's say at 6U, we're going to make sure that no matter how good your kid is, good with quotation marks for those of you listening to us on Spotify, quotation marks, or how not good your kid is at hockey, by the end of the year, we're going to be able to teach these kids how to hockey stop. By the end of the year, we're going to be able to teach them how to catch a pass from 10 feet away and make a 10-foot pass. By the end of the year, we're going to be able to have them be able to lift the puck when they shoot at 6U. Let's figure out where we have.
So outcomes-driven planning.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we get to December. We put this survey out. And little Johnny or little Julie's.
It's always little Johnny.
Little Johnny or little Julie's mom and dad are like, well, you said at the beginning of the year that my kid would be able to do
It's only December. It's only December.
And your kid doesn't come to practice every week. And, so this is where you have to have like this, it's a 50-50 proposition. Actually, it's a 33-33, and then I'll call it 34 proposition. 33% is the parent, 33% is the coach, and 34% is the player. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's 100. Matt's undefeated. So I think that as much as you have these surveys, and ultimately, look, the parents in hockey are the kids are you can call them the customers in some degree, because they are. But you have to, like, if you say, hey, I was expecting this outcome, and it's like, well, let's take a look at, let's do a reverse survey here. And, coaches, how are you rating your kids, or how are you, what's that environment like? I think it's very difficult for us to, and this is where we've fallen to, you get into these situations where, and we've lived it, my kid's not progressing at the level that he or she should. Well, what is your definition of that progress?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you getting that expectation from? And so don't you think that the organizations, and there's these great things out there called USA Hockey and Hockey Canada and the Swedish Federation and the Finnish Hockey Association that have developed these standards, shouldn't we be starting there first and then be allowing the kids to either stretch it, meet it, or recognize that maybe there's a disconnect? I mean, how do you do that? Because that to me has always been the most frustrating thing, is you have expectations that maybe aren't aligned. You have organizations that don't set standards, and then you don't have a clear path for the coaches. So where does that? How do organizations fix that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've heard and kind of developed when I'm working with coaches or organizations that really works is what I refer to as a pre-mortem. So this is August, end of August, your board is together, everything's about to start turning around, and off we go. Stop at that point. What are the 3 things that are most likely to happen that are going to get in our way? Because like you kind of said, and kind of got into that, right?
Great question.
So you can constantly kind of build off of that, or not have any of those certain expectations, whether it's throughout the year or at the end of the year or middle of the year or whatever that looks like. But in that progression, what do I expect is going to go wrong this year? Well, we're probably going to have an issue with parent about this or that. Again, we're getting into asking why and dissecting things. Well, why are we going to have an issue with this parent group? This coaches that have been there before. Okay, what were their complaints then? Why were they a problem last year? Okay, they were communicated with. We didn't do a clear job as an organization to say at the end of the year, these are the standards and this is what it's going to be. But checking that on a regular basis throughout the year is going to see if we're getting there, if we're dropping down, what's the feeling here and there, and if that's something spread within the organization, we take that back, and next year we try to do it better and improve it for the next group of kids, right? I think organizations will speed things up if we've got a problem here, we also have a problem here, instead of jumping in all kinds of different directions and trying to solve all the fires at once. What are the 3 things that are most likely to go wrong this year? And then just walk it back. Keep asking why, because somewhere in there is going to be something you can change, and it's not going to be grand. It's going to be an adjustment of how we explain something or how we define something or whatever that is. But you walk that all the way back. You haven't solved the problem you were worried about. You've solved problems along the way again.
Last minute of play in this period.
Matt, there's a great called the Y Store. You're making me think of it with your Y.
We'll talk a little bit about how we not only coach hockey, talk hockey, administer hockey, play hockey. We also have a band. So, that's another story.
It's great.
I want to continue this conversation. I think it's fascinating to me how the questions of what could go wrong, and that's this pre-mortem aspect. I think that's something that is that probably a lot of clubs don't do enough of. We've got to pay another bill. So if you've got a couple minutes here to sit tight with us, we'll be right back, and we'll finish up here with Matt Dumouchelle of the Coaches Site. Well, that segment of Too Many Men on the Mic was brought to you by 5B Designs. St. Louis hockey families and business leaders. If you need custom gear that stands out and stands for something, it's time to meet 5B Designs. Founded by Shannon Brahini, a proud St. Louis mom and entrepreneur, 5B Designs is a woman-owned small business that brings purpose to custom apparel. Whether you're suiting up your youth or high school hockey team or leveling up your company's branded swag, 5B delivers top-notch quality with a personal touch. You need a team store? No problem. Corporate polos or event giveaways, they've got you covered. 5B makes it easy with fast turnaround, flexible service, and designs your players or employees will love to wear. Check them out at stores.inksoft.com/5B designs. That's the word 5. And if you are watching on our YouTube feed, go ahead and scan the QR code on the top right corner of your screen and see what great gear and great service looks like.
We're back here with Matt Dumouchelle. Matt is with the Coaches Site. That's www.thecoachessite.com. Matt, as we were sitting here on break, I was thinking about a challenge that I think we both encountered, and I'm sure you probably encountered it too, where you've got a youth hockey association that has volunteers. Maybe some of them have a hockey background. Many of them may not have. And let's say you're an association that's large enough to have a hockey director, somebody who's played the game, that's grown up. I can imagine you probably encountered this. We have, where you've got a board that's saying, this is our plan, this is what we want to do. You've got a coaching director that may say, yeah, I hear you, but maybe I'm not listening, and really I'm focused on some of the hockey things that are there, or that I know, and I'll listen to the board. But talk through some of the challenges of that, because that is a challenge I think we've encountered between volunteers and then people with hockey backgrounds that are in hockey director leadership positions.
Yeah, for sure. And you've hit on a great point, and probably an entire episode on its own, when you get to not just even motivating, I guess, some volunteers or coaches or board members that have been there for a while, that have been kind of running through the motions, and it's kind of turned into what it is. Again, you can't put a finger on that problem, and that is not one conversation away from being sorted out. But the important thing that's in that too is again just kind of getting all the way back to the interest in even doing this. In this day and age, we've got so many things to distract us, and so many other things to do, or so many other things that we think we should be doing. You've been a board member here for 20 years. What has kept you engaged and interested in doing this? If you can have those conversations to see even where they're coming from, like the commonality that we work through in any youth organization, group organization, whatever that looks like, is the most, I guess, beneficial recipient of what an organization that's run properly looks like. And it's creating the best youth sports experience for all the kids that are involved, right? We got into hockey as kids. We want to be hockey directors because we want to give back, or we want to share what we've learned. We want to help the kids. Why do you spend so much time here? The volunteers been coming there for 40 years. They just love seeing the kids running around in the hallway, or whatever that looks like, right? At some point, it's all going to connect back to the idea of either giving back or helping the youth and giving them an opportunity to play a sport or do an activity. There's a source back there, and you try not to get too Dr. Phil about it, but there's a way to bring that back to why we're all involved in the first place, and walk that through afterwards.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say in so many ways is don't lose sight of while we're all here. And if you've got a coaching director, they may have their intentions, which is to share some of their hockey knowledge, but realize that other people that are part of your community also are there for a good reason. And they may not be aligned to having on-ice skills to be able to coach. So how can we work together to come up with a plan?
Right. Everybody going into that picture and saying, being honest with themselves as the volunteers, listen, I don't understand hockey the way you understand hockey. You do hockey and I'll take care of registration or whatever that looks like. But, that commonality ends up creating that area or that space for the kids to enjoy. You can always bring it back to a memory or something like that drove you to that sport or that connection. And again, this isn't like a sitting around the campfire kumbaya kind of moment, but you're doing this to give back to whatever community it is. Let's do the best job we can together so that kid that doesn't end up needing to use the power play in life that you designed so well needs it to be a good leader at home or a good leader when they go to university or whatever that looks like. Let's create that experience for the kid that they'll always come back and remember the time they played youth sports in St. Louis.
So anybody that didn't listen to the first part of our podcast knows Matt is definitely from Canada now because he said university and not college.
I haven't said A once. I've been very careful.
I think I've actually said it a couple times more than he has. So these youth hockey organizations specifically across the country are becoming more business-like. Let's face it. They are taking in revenue to register and pay for ice and provide facilities and coaching in some areas in excess of $1 million to $2 million a year. A lot of organizations are building facilities, whether it's rinks, whether it's off-ice facilities. They're working together with municipalities. And so what is the level of parents are going to come and go. Volunteers are going to come and go for the most part as their kids go through. They could move. Their kids may decide next year they don't want to play the sport anymore. So in order to maintain a level of consistency, when I say success, what I mean is an environment where the kids are excited to come back and play the next year, because that has to be the ultimate goal. What should organizations be doing? We see some organizations hiring administrators or executive directors to go along with people who are coaching. It's become, I don't want to say the word business, but it's become very business-like in a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities. How do you maintain, as an organization, a successful, through line to keep that culture going, and at the same time not lose sight of what's most important?
Right. That's a great question and a great scenario. And again, when you're talking about a mission statement,
back to that one.
if you're talking about a mission statement as an organization, what does that truly mean? What does that look like? And we talked earlier. You talk about things in threes. What does that look like if we were to say, we are community minded? Well, in three ways, how do you describe community minded? What does that mean? How are we able to dial that back to end up being, three words, three phrases, however you want that to look? This is what we stand for: family, fun, competition. Whatever you want to pick, three random words. You use that as your North Star. You use that as when we're making a decision as a board or as a coaching director. Is this in line with those three things? It's not what's more popular. It's not who's going to benefit from this and that. It's, are we walking the line when we said these are our three things? Is this what we're doing because of the three things that we're working through? And it happens, and it takes some time to develop. But you start to see that, in Ontario, we just introduced open borders for the first time. So, it doesn't have to be my neighborhood youth program. I can go wherever I want. All the stories that you can imagine are true. There's probably multiple examples of it happening in the GTA or some of the bigger centers all the time. But at the end of the day, we've turned this into this is better for the player. The player can go wherever they want. The parent can go wherever they want. And we're not spending enough time looking at this as an organization, saying this is the moment that we get to say we stand for A, B, and C. If you're going to enroll your kid in our organization, these are the 3 things that we will guarantee will happen throughout your entire experience here. And then you're using that as the decision maker when you're looking to make big decisions, smaller decisions. Is that in line with those 3? Because end of the day, like you said, when the hockey players come and go, the parents come and go, the board members come and go, have we upheld our part of the agreement to stand for the 3 things that we say we stand for?
Well, it's interesting you bring up the open borders, and when you talk about Sweden, for instance, it's the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what your child exhibits on the ice, from the time they're 6 till the time they're 12, they're playing with the same kids.
Right.
There is, and it allows them to develop that sense of community. Granted, their population is a little bit different than certainly the United States and also Canada. But I liked what you said there, and what we see a lot of, especially as we've gotten to a point where some of the kids we've coached have ended their youth hockey journey, and they're either playing junior or college, or maybe they're deciding to come back and help coach. I think building that community and then building a pipeline of future coaches who want to be, maybe they're not going to be a part of the organization they grew up with because of where they live, but they want to get into coaching. I had 2 former players reach out to me and ask about figuring out if we could find a place for them to coach this summer. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, they needed gas money, but there's other ways they could do that. I think they enjoy, so it's interesting. I'd love to peel back that onion a little bit, but I think we'd definitely be here for another episode or
part 2.
No, but I do want to say something on that, and it kind of ties in line, with that sense of pride, and when we talk about the logo on the front and all of that. One thing that I've always envied where I am, again in Windsor, Ontario, like I'm just across the border from Detroit. I'm 45 minutes from Ann Arbor. I grew up a state of Michigan boy from Ontario.
Michigan's in 2 Final Fours right now. One's a Frozen Four, one's a Final Four.
I knew it was coming.
I'm just saying,
it's wild.
we might have their hockey puck sitting. There we go.
That's great. That's very funny. But the one thing I've always envied is where you went to college is part of your DNA, right? It's part of your identity. Guys that went to Michigan, the most beautiful woman in the world could walk by, but if you find out she went to Michigan State, she falls on the radar pretty quick.
My wife went to Michigan State. Let's not say Ohio State. We'll say Ohio State.
Ohio State, perfect. So that's when
the woman in the world did go to Michigan State. For the record.
So you already took her. So they're all gone. But it's the pride of what that stands for and what that means. An organization in Europe. Countless ones. I'm talking Frölunda in Sweden, Jokerit in Finland. They're talking about we hope that child grows up to that teenager, what have you, as somebody that enjoyed their time so much here that when they're older, maybe they want to volunteer coach. When they're a parent, they would want their child to go through this program. Maybe they end up owning a business, so they sponsor the team or they buy season tickets to the first team. It becomes part of the DNA of how that kid grew up. I think one thing that we underestimate sometimes, which is hard to believe because of being coaches and living that all the time. The kids that you guys are involved with outside of their parents, maybe their teacher, are probably the most influential people that child is around at some of their most important ages. So, it doesn't matter, again, where you came from or what your background is from a hockey relations standpoint. It's getting down to that part where, we're creating an experience that we hope a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, whatever that is, remembers until they're 60, until they're 90, and talk so highly about the time that they spent there.
I love it. Matt, thanks so much for spending time with us tonight. I have no doubt we could do part 2, part 3, part 10. And between the 2 of you guys, you can cover all of the state of Michigan and the surrounding areas.
Perfect.
I know the 401 and 402 very, very well.
Yeah.
From Wapu Island and Campbell Street down to Olette.
Oh, so you saw everything then.
And everything in between. London. London is one of the coolest towns you can ever go to. The Armory.
Yeah.
What was it? Crazy Joe's.
Do I need to leave?
No, come with us. It'll be great. We'll show you around.
Matt, thanks so much for joining us. If you guys, for those of you listening, you want to check it out, thecoachessite.com. Great resource. Look up Matt Dumouchelle, read his articles, listen to his podcast. Matt, we'd love to have you on again. And thanks for spending time with us tonight.
Anytime, guys. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Matt.
Wow, digging deep into the Michigan and Canadian catalog.
I tell you,
I knew you could do it. You just had a partner in crime this week.
It could have gotten really bad. It could have gone. We could have been talking about poutine.
Could have been talking about what
Don Cherries and Galaxy. Galaxy was kind of the off the beaten path place that if you had Canadian friends and if they happened to be female, they would say, "Hey, why don't you come over on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday or Friday, and we'll take you to a real bar."
So, did you ever have a Canadian girlfriend?
I told a lot of people I did. He thought she was. I had. There were instances where there were repeat visits,
Yes.
but
And it sounded better if she was Canadian.
it was a lot easier to get over the border back then. Nowadays you need to have a passport or a passport card, but back in the 90s, it was a lot easier to go back and forth. And so, in fact, I had relatives that lived in Canada. My grandmother used to take us over to see Aunt Stephanie and all that stuff. And so,
There you go.
but yeah, just a great conversation. We talked about when we started this podcast about focusing on the positive, focusing on the 95% when it comes to talent and what hockey really means on a youth basis. And we talked about focusing on the positive aspects, not the crazy TikToks and Instagrams and Facebook posts. And I think Matt and the Coaches Site have a great opportunity to kind of mirror that mission as well and aggregate best practices and really at the end of the day, creating a safe environment and an environment where the kids and parents want to come back.
Yeah, and the triangle is a good analogy. It's a good way to think about it. You can call it triangles, you can call it threes, you can call whatever ism that you want to create. But there are three legs to success, and it's the organization, and it's coaches, and it's parents working together.
Yep, and
you love it in peace and harmony, and so we're going to stay focused on achieving peace and harmony.
Peace and love, Ringo Starr. So it's been a week. It's been a minute since we were last together.
Yeah.
A lot has happened as far as the hockey world is concerned. My older son's team, we made the trip out to Westchester, Pennsylvania, and it was a season to celebrate. Winning a regular season championship, a playoff championship for the Central States, the state championship to go to nationals. Came up a little short. Obviously, there was some heartbreak because a lot of these kids are ending their journey. But I had a chance to witness a group of kids and a group of parents led by a great coach, frankly. And it was a drama-free year, and the kids didn't want to leave. Parents were debating, and do we try to get a flight out? Do we try to get home early? The kids said, nope, we're staying. Nice. And it was one of the best. It was really a great bookend to a phenomenal season. And for me, an awesome time to spend with my son as he ends his youth hockey career.
And congratulations, you've run the gauntlet. You've gone the whole journey through 18U. I wish my weekend story was as good as yours. I was doing spring house projects. So you win. You win.
Yeah, it's great though. You get home on a Saturday, I told my wife, we got home at like 1:00, so there's plenty of Saturday left. And I go, man, we got up at 5:30 in the morning and, and we're just going to relax. And, of course, the honey-do list now carries over to this weekend.
Exactly.
So, great time though in the spring here in St. Louis. Specifically, we've got spring hockey in full full spring, I guess. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, we got B team, we got
B
prep
team,
for high school,
prep team.
we got kids at club level that are having the opportunity maybe to look at things like open district for the first time.
Yep.
Or maybe thinking about how they develop this year and what that means and what kind of player they want to be next fall and what they want to work on this spring to get there. So great time to reflect. I wish it could be a great time to get out of spring house projects, but
no such luck. No such luck. Well,
Last minute of play in this period.
we're at the end of the game. I think we've won this one again. Great guests again. Thanks again to Matt Dumouchelle from the coaches site for joining us and talking all things hockey organization, hockey coaches, and culture. Coach, we've got a lot of things going on this week. I'm going to be on the ice a couple of times. We've got high school, Ladue B team, Ladue prep. Can't wait to take some of these great lessons that we learned and talked about today and put them in action. But with that, I think we are. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Go to our website, toomanymenonthe mic.com. That's the number 2.
Go Blues.
Go Blues.